We asked everyone on Twitter, hey, what must happen for OU to return to Arlington and have a chance, not just win, but to have a chance to win a Big 12 title this fall in football? And we got almost 100 responses already in a little more than 24 hours of people that had a variety of different things that they want to see changed as we go through the 2023 season. Tyler, you and I have grabbed our top three that we think have to happen. We're going to kind of weave in some of these Twitter responses that we got as well, just to highlight where things go. Tyler, do you want to go first with your number one, though?
Yeah, I'll kind of kick things off here. Number one for me, Adam, when you kind of look at, obviously Oklahoma is not going to have the likes of a Baker Mayfield, a Kyler Murray, a Jalen Hurts, somebody that's going to be able to go out there and score 50 to 55 points a game, be able to cover, some of the holes and deficiencies of this Oklahoma defense like we've seen over the past few years. So number one for me, when looking at what Oklahoma must do to find their way back to competing for a Big 12 championship in Arlington, it starts with difference makers in the trenches. The defensive line, be an asset, not a liability. Oklahoma's defense last year was ranked 99th in the country, giving up almost 30 points a game, close to 190 rushing yards a game. And the stat that's the most alarming to me, Adam, 28 sacks in 13 games last year. 7 of those were from linebackers, and 4.5 of those came from Reggie Grimes in the first couple of weeks of the season. So the pass rush, was pretty much non-existent from the defensive line for most of last year. So you've got to have your veterans like an Isaiah Coe, Jordan Kelly, Marcus Stripling. It's time for those guys to step up. And then you've also got to look at some of the young guys that are not really young anymore. Got a couple years already on campus. Reggie Grimes, Ethan Downs. I'm going to throw R. Mason Thomas into that category as well. Who's going to ramp up their play this year and, not just be a guy that takes up space or a guy that eats blocks, but who's a guy that can come in there and find their way into the backfield, get some tackles for loss, or find a way on a 3rd down and 5, figure out a way to beat your guy and get after Quinn Ewers and get that pivotal sack in the Cotton Bowl that can kind of change the momentum of the game. And then kind of my last little piece here, Adam, on the difference makers in the trenches, PJ Adebawore needs to grow and be a playmaker, at least in the 3rd down obvious passing situations right here. We've seen him on tape. We've seen him in person. The guy is as impressive of a prospect on the defensive side of the football that Oklahoma has seen in Norman in, I don't know, since maybe the Gerald McCoy days, maybe a few more towards the early 2000s. But PJ needs to step up. The transfers need to pan out. Obviously, we lost Jalen Redmond, a couple more guys, to graduation to the NFL. Rondell Bothroyd, Jacob Lacey, Trace Ford, Devin Sears. At least one, if not 2 of those guys needs to pan out and be a difference maker for this team, because what we've seen from Brent Venables' defenses, for the better part of the last 20 years, what gives his defense, his linebackers, his secondary the best opportunity to make plays? It's whenever the defensive line is able to hold up on their own and be able to, stuff those run gaps, get after the quarterback, allow those other 7 guys, to kind of roam free and make plays and be assignment sound. And that's the biggest thing for me, Adam. Defensive line, do not be a liability, be an asset, be a difference maker, and figure out a way to make some plays.
Chad Edwards agrees with you strongly. He responded on Twitter saying that linebackers essentially make plays because of a sound D-line. Our friend of the pod, Jordan Esco, he was kind of along the same path, saying that, hey, we're painfully aware of just how ordinary that defensive line play has been in recent years, and that's got to change. I'm in agreement there. That was also on my list of 3 things that I want to see happen, but I'll be a little bit more specific here. I'm going to be specific to Rondell Bothroyd needs to be as advertised. We need 7 sacks out of him this year, in my opinion. He's capable of doing that. He's got the past record of doing that number of sacks over his junior and senior year at Wake Forest. Now he's coming into his 5th year. I think he can certainly do that. We need him to be a hit out of the transfer portal for us. If we look back to 2021, OU had Isaiah Thomas and Nick Benito both with 7 sacks. That was the 60th ranked defense in the country in 2021. Not great. A lot of things they could have been better at. Not very good, but also not really bad at the same time either. I think that defense was good enough to get OU to a Big 12 championship game in 2021. Sure. And so I think if you get Rondell Bothroyd with 7 sacks, think that's a good number for him to achieve. And then the second piece of that is our Mason Thomas needs to reach his full potential. We saw his twitchiness last year. He had a little bit of trouble staying healthy. He's got some more weight on the frame at this point. He's got another year under the system to know what he's supposed to do, to be adjusted to college life and college football. And so I think those are the two guys I look at and I say, okay, I think they can have the highest level of sustained, reliable success from the defensive line position. Trace Ford, nice guy. He's struggled with injuries. I have high hopes for him. I think he's an easy guy to root for. Has never really put up more than 4.5 sacks in a year. And that was, our leader last year was 4.5 sacks from OU. And then PJ, love PJ, have high hopes for him. I don't know what we're going to get out of a freshman. Is he going to be up and down throughout the year? Is he going to, really surge at the end of the year? Reggie Grimes, I think kind of know what he is, and Ethan Downs. I think we can get some more out of him. He might be a nice piece there, but I think our Mason Thomas and Rondell Bothroyd are the two guys that we absolutely need high-level production from because, as Chad Edwards said on Twitter that we mentioned a moment ago, that just makes the rest of the defense look so much better, and I think our secondary is pretty good. I think we were pretty good last year in the secondary. They just couldn't hold up long enough with the lack of pass rush. So I think that's the biggest thing that was number one on my list of things that need to change.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Number 2 on the list for me is consistent key contributors must emerge in the wide receiver room. To me, it's the Batman and Robin analogy. Who is going to be the sidekick to Jaleel Farouk in this Oklahoma offense? I'm not talking about Drake Stoops. We know what we've got in Drake, and I think that many people, us too, especially on this podcast, are expecting Drake to take his game even one step higher than what it was a year ago. I'm talking about a guy other than Jaleel Farouk, who can go out on a Saturday, catch 8 balls for 120 yards, score a couple of touchdowns, or who's going to be that guy when you're in the Cotton Bowl? Texas is bracketing Jaleel Farouk with a safety over the top, and you need a big play. Who's going to emerge and be that guy for this Oklahoma offense? We just simply don't know at this point, and honestly, Adam, that kind of concerns me a little bit going into this season. We're not used to seeing that at a place like Oklahoma with the pedigree and the tradition at that position with some of the guys that have come through this program. But for this offense to function, for this offense to be as explosive and as efficient as Jeff Lebby wants it to be, a guy or two has got to emerge from Emmett Jones's room. And we feel pretty good about the offensive line right now. We expect Dylan Gabriel to be that dude once fall ball kicks off. We're going to kind of wait and see how the tight end position, how that room kind of comes to fruition. I'm super excited about the running back position, even with Javonte Barnes in a boot. It doesn't sound like that's going to be something that's going to impact him once we do get into the meat and potatoes of the season. But we have to have some dudes out wide that can make some competitive plays in the passing game and can be a reliable asset for Dylan Gabriel as the season goes on. So that's the big one for me. Wide receiver, you've got to go out there and find 1 to 2 viable targets that can help complement what we expect from a big year in Jaleel Farouk.
That one's interesting, and we did get several responses around the wide receivers, and I think that's mainly because there's just a little bit of mystery and intrigue about what we might get out of that position group. I didn't really have that one in consideration for me as any of my bullet points, mainly because I can't recall a team from OU that has ever been held back specifically because of the receivers. I think it's I don't want to discount the importance of the position, but I just feel like you don't win or lose too many games because of a receiver or lack thereof. And OU's always had success at wide receivers. I think you'd have to go back to maybe 2014, probably a year where Sterling Shepard was hurt a little bit, and you had Trevor Knight coming off his Sugar Bowl performance. There's a lot of QBs rotating in and out. I don't know if Sterling actually hit 1,000 yards in that year, but I think you'd have to go back to at least 2014 to find an OU offense that didn't have 1,000-yard receiver. So
right.
I'm not super concerned about that, but I do think it's valid. Like, we definitely want to know that we've got some guys and playmakers there. My number 2 is on the offensive side of the ball, but I went to the offensive line, and I said, hey, someone needs to beat out McCade Mattower for that left guard position. I think if we see a Savion Byrd or a Jake Taylor or even a Caden Green for that matter overtake an upperclassman, a guy that transferred in from Cal that basically was just given that starting position, in my opinion, because there were too many young guys and he had some experience. If we can see one of those younger guys beat him out at this point, because we know that they're more talented, they were more highly regarded coming out of high school, just have to put the pieces together, develop their bodies. I think that's a good sign for this offensive line. I think you want your best strongest athletes, guys out there that you can say, hey, okay, now we can rely on, Savion Byrd, for example. We know he's talented, but it might be between the ears for him, for example. So I think that would be a really good sign for this team, because the more you're able to get your best players in the offensive line, the more that's going to pay dividends in Game 6, in Game 8, in Game 10, when I think you really need this team to be strong running the ball. You have to take pressure off of Dillon Gabriel with an incredible running game that does truly need to be a 1-2 punch. It can't be an Eric Gray and then 10% of carries to Javonte Barnes. It needs to be a true 1-2 punch, in my opinion, maybe even a third guy mixed in there, because I want this team to be so run heavy that we no longer have to worry about Dillon Gabriel on 3rd and long. It shouldn't be a concern because we're running the ball so well. So that's my number 2.
Yeah, and I think you make a really good point. It's going to be interesting to see what the lineup is, not just the rotation, but, who kind of are Bill's, top 5, top 6 guys. I mean, kind of as we sit here right now, Adam, it really only kind of feels like 3 positions we can pretty much pencil in who those guys are going to be. Obviously, your 2 tackles with Walter Rouse and Tyler Guyton. Obviously, if Andrew Rame can stay healthy, he's going to be your, your center, your anchor of that offensive line. And then you've got a lot of really good, interesting pieces to kind of fill out those 2 guard spots. Obviously, McKay Tower is the most experienced of all those guys, proven starter from a year ago. There were a lot of times last year where he kind of left us wanting more. We were expecting more out of his play. Obviously we'll see what he does going into year 2 of this Jeff Lebby scheme. Another year under Bill Beanbow. Another year in the weight room with Schmitty. But between Matower, Savion Byrd, Jake Taylor is another one that's getting quite a bit of run over the course of the first few weeks of spring ball from some of the things that we've been hearing. So again, there's a lot of good young pieces. It's just a matter of how can Bill, spend the next 5 months figuring out a way to figure out who those top 5 are, who he feels most comfortable rolling out there once Arkansas State comes into town here in just 5 short months.
Yeah. What's your number 2, Tyler?
Number 2 for me, and this is actually going to be number 3 for me. I've already gone through the defensive line and the wide receivers, but I thought that this would be a great way to tie in some of the responses that we've gotten on Twitter from this question. And the biggest thing for me that I think is going to help Oklahoma get back into contention to where they're in Arlington playing for a Big 12 championship, it's game management and playing complementary football. All 4 phases need to be better for Oklahoma this season. What I mean by all 4 phases, you've got your offense, your defense, your special teams, and that 4th phase is coaching. In-game situations, apparently, or especially, because there were a lot of moments last year, whether it was sparing a timeout here, whether it was a delay of game, it kind of felt like Jeff Lebby and Brent Venables found themselves in situations where, I don't know if panic or froze was the right word, but it's obvious with the late game management, some of the situations with the clock, with the play calling, with Oklahoma, going 0-5 in 1 possession games last season. We've got to figure out a way to elevate our coaching, to figure out a way to put our players in a better situation to where, in a 1 possession game, it's less than a handful of plays over the course of 60 minutes of football that's going to make or break your team and make or break that game, and deciding whether you're on the win or the whether what side of the win and loss column you're on. So I think that going into this year, Brent obviously I think is going to be that much better. He's just going to be more comfortable. He's used to this. But yeah, game management for me, and I think that Bryson Gibson on Twitter complement one another. If the defense gives up a long drive but only gives up 3, offense, you can't come out there and just go 3 and out and only spend a minute and a half out there on the field and then force the hand the ball over and say, defense, go stop them again. So got to figure out a way to play complementary football, put drives together on offense, spell your defense, give them a little bit of a breather, and in a situation where the defense comes up with the turnover or they get a 3 and out, offense, go out there and build on that momentum. Let's go down there and score and give the ball back to our defense, because that's just going to raise the confidence of your entire football team. It's going to raise the confidence of your coaching staff, and you're going to play a better brand of football once your confidence level is higher and people feel good about what they're doing.
Yeah, how many times did we see the momentum of a game turn as an opponent scores a touchdown, OU gets kickoff, 3 straight passes, maybe a sack. Yeah, 3 and out and off the field so fast. So I 100% agree with Bryson and our guy Fire Clark on Twitter. I don't know who Clark is, but I guess he should be fired.
We know who Clark is.
Yeah, okay, all right. Maybe it's that Clark. But But yeah, he also pointed out just, you can't be putting your defense back out, after a drive of a minute or 30. And honestly, that's being generous from how many times we saw that last year. OU was 127th out of 131 teams in total time of possession. So there needs to be more complementary football there. I think Strubalicious Def probably did the most concise way of just saying this, a clear and deliberate improvement in game management. And that is time of possession. That's the flow of the offense. It also comes down to, some of the decision making that Brent did. Some things he did were genius. We saw the special teams touchdown at Iowa State. We saw special team success early in the game against Texas, and then nothing worked after that. But we also saw, West Virginia, the decision to kick the field goal. At Texas Tech, the decision, to kick the field goal there or not kick the field goal. So there's a couple different things, and that was why my number 3 was right there in line with you. Brent, and this is the way I phrased it, was Brent needs to take the biggest offseason leap. Because I think last year, this team had so many different issues from, roster and new transfers and new systems and guys learning, coaches learning, Brent himself learning. But Brent needs to be the guy that needs to shoulder the most responsibility for where this team can go. And I think that's just him taking that massive offseason leap of, okay, how am I going to manage this game? How am I going to manage the schemes of putting my guys in the best chance to be successful? We have Dylan Gabriel. We know his limitations. How do we put him in the best chance to succeed? How do we get younger, more athletic guys on the field and give them the best chance to succeed? So I think Brent taking the biggest offseason leap as just a head coach and how he manages the games and the programs will certainly go a long way.